I have this bandsaw which is pretty common and rebranded under many styles around the country, and they're all pretty similar. And this one's got a blown LED light, so I'll show you how to fix that in this video. Stay watching. The light will be much easier to work on if we clamp it in place. So I grab a couple of quick clamps and a block of timber and I clamp it down so that it's much easier to work on. The bezel just unscrews off the front. Just be cautious, this is all plastic and can be easily broken. And I set that to one side. Then I grab my multimeter and I check to see what the voltage is across the LED and which terminal is the positive terminal. I mark the positive terminal with the red marker so that I know when I put the new element in that I've got it the right way around. I pull the LED forward. It's just sitting on some flying leads. It's got a aluminium heatsink sitting behind it, and with my soldering iron I disconnect the wires that exist there now. I put a little clip in it just to hold it out and make it easier to work on. I grab my soldering iron and some tweezers and just unsoldered the two wires that are already there. I already know what the polarity is because I've checked that with the multimeter. Just be cautious with the heat and be patient. It takes a little bit of work to get these off without burning everything. Once that's done, it's a simple matter of just drawing the LED off with the heatsink, and the wires that come up from the switch are just sitting there inside the shell. Then, using some flying leads and alligator clips, I test the new LED to make sure that it will work when I solder it all back in. The old LED was 5 volts and the new one, which I have got a link to below from Core Electronics, is between 3 and 3.8 volts, and so we need to drop the voltage a little to make sure we don't burn it out. I do this by adding 2 diodes in series, in the right direction of course, and each diode drops about 0.6 of a volt, and so we get very close to the voltage that is allowed on the new module. Here's the circuit that I used, 1 diode in each leg, just because it's physically easier to mount it that way inside the escutcheon that holds the LED. Make sure you get those bands on the diodes the right way round, otherwise the LED won't work. I solder some flying leads onto the new module, noting the positive and negative terminal, and I've already tested that to make sure it works, but they're marked anyway, plus and minus, so that's pretty straightforward. Next up, I mount the LED module onto the heatsink, running the wires back down through the holes, and I will add a little bit of heat sink material behind the LED so that we get maximum heat transfer onto the heatsink. The LED will get quite warm in use. Next up, I add some heat shrink over the wires, which will be used to cover the diodes and make sure they don't short out when we put it all back together. I've used 3 amp diodes. 1 amp diodes would work just as well, but probably get a little bit hotter, and the 3 amp diodes are quite physically strong and will fit inside the escutcheon. Here I am soldering them onto the leads that are coming down from the switch. Then I solder on the 2 flying leads, making sure I have the polarity right In my case, I used yellow for positive and green for negative. I solder these onto the ends of the diodes. Then a quick test with the switch to make sure it all works, which it is, which is great. Now I will slide the heat shrink back up over the diodes, and with a heat gun I'll shrink that down. This stops anything shorting out once we reassemble it. It's important to make sure those flying leads aren't too long, otherwise you won't fit everything back inside the escutcheon. Now it's just a matter of carefully assembling all the parts back inside the escutcheon without crimping or catching any of those wires. The wires I didn't use very heavy wires, and it doesn't need it because it's only drawing a reasonably small current for the LED, and they're very short wires. So we've pushed that in very, very carefully, and then we can put the front bezel and the lens back on. Once again, treat it with care because this is plastic and it is very easy to break. So there we have it. A reasonably straightforward repair if you take your time and you follow the circuit that I've given you. Good luck with your repair. Thanks for watching.